Hi guys, and welcome to the first episode of Keeping Up with Katherine, the podcast where we'll be discussing all things communications. This week we'll be exploring the role of emotions, storytelling and visual communications in PR, and we'll be joined by three guests who are all at different points in their comms careers. Emotions, storytelling and visual communications play a pivotal role in helping organisations portray a personality in order to connect with audiences. And today's guests will each give us their take on the impact of these techniques. Our first guest today is Katherine Price, a digital PR executive at ICS Digital, who will be giving her insight on the topic from an agency perspective. Hey Cassie, so first of all, when you're working on client accounts, do you notice any change in performance of campaigns and press releases when they use emotions, storytelling and visual comms?
I think emotions, yes. Storytelling and visual comms, no. It really depends on who you're targeting. Some journalists really like visuals because it helps them. They don't have to worry about searching through their archives and stuff to get their visuals for their copy. It really depends on what your campaign is on. If it's very data driven or stat heavy, then it's usually nice to have some visuals. But I think emotions are the biggest things that get a campaign to be more successful. You need a good emotional hook.
Okay. So what audiences have you found respond best to using these techniques?
I think so sports audiences and also your, how would I say it nicely? Your Karens really like the emotional side of things. Mm-hmm. They like the big headlines, the emotional side, the things that's going to get them angry or talk about something, or like sports audience as well. They love a good number stat or pitting fans against each other or anything against the Patriots. But so if you pit like rival sports teams together, that's really big. So like emotional is probably the one that we focus on the most, but depending on like in other clients, you'll find that kind of more professional react better to something visual, like a data visualization, rather than emotional.
Okay, so different audiences respond better to different techniques. Yeah. Okay, so do you think there are any industries where the use of emotions, storytelling and visual comms in PR aren't needed or aren't essential?
I think I kind of just touched on it where, your sports industry. I mean, I'm not saying visual like techniques won't work in a sports industry, mm-hmm. but I wouldn't say that they're the most important. We create like dedicated landing pages for clients with really good visuals, but sometimes just a bit of like shock factor that gets better response. I think they all work, but there's some that work better for others, right, depending on the industry.
Yeah. So you say you use a lot of mostly emotions. Being in the digital PR industry, do you find it harder to convey emotions through your comms because you're online?
Sometimes. I think it's as well because we work in quite a lot of different markets. So we work in a lot of the US, Canada market, but also some other clients, the UK. So it's trying to figure out how a British audience is going to read something, because they'll read something very different to an American or a Canadian audience. So it's working that out, because the humour that we have, it might be interpreted completely different by an American audience. So it's something that we have to think about. Yeah, sometimes it's difficult when you're in different markets, like the same client, but two different places.
I don't think everyone always takes into consideration different cultures as well when they're looking at emotional things. So finally, are there any campaigns or press releases that you have produced that incorporate the techniques we've just been discussing that you are proud of, and why?
So when a campaign gets good coverage, that makes me proud. Mm-hmm. I think we did one around the Super Bowl because it was the day after Valentine's Day. Yeah. So we surveyed some Americans, about 1,000 Americans, to ask them like if they it's really fun. We asked them if they would forgo sex if it meant their team would win the Super Bowl. Right. So it's just like a really funny thing, and it got us quite a bit of coverage, and it got a lot of people talking. And like there was other questions as well, but it was kind of that line. it's just, I mean, I wouldn't say like I'm proud of it.
It's something you enjoyed working
But
on.
it's just like really interesting, and it just kind of shows how in like digital PR as well, that not everything has to be like, stupidly serious. You can be, I mean, it depends on your client, you can be a bit funny and out there, and I just think as long as it's not hurting anyone, it's not a problem.
Next up, we have Diana Bustega, a PR and comms graduate from Leeds Beckett University, who is just starting out and wants to forge her career in the creative comms space. Hi Diana, so to kick things off, I know you have a passion for visual communications and design, so could you talk us through what interests you about the topic?
I believe I just enjoy the process of bringing your ideas to reality. I know sometimes it's a bit of a really detailed process and it takes hours and hours and days, but the final result and the fact that you can influence somehow your audience through like simple images or colors is interesting to me.
Okay, so on that theme of like simplicity and colours, I want to talk about the use of visual comms, and a recent campaign that I saw was Coinbase, the crypto company, and they debuted a campaign during this year's Super Bowl halftime show, and all it showed was a changing colour QR code bouncing around the screen like the old DVD pause screen. And in my opinion, the use of visuals had a strong impact because of the simplicity and the nostalgia. So can you recall any PR campaigns that impacted you because of the visuals used?
I think the Dove campaign, All Bodies Are the Same, I think it was called. And it was maybe not that simple as yours, but the fact that they had so much diversity in terms of like body shapes and cultural backgrounds with different women, and they gave a really strong message about body positivity and the way they consider their products as being inclusive for all types of women was simple from my perspective, but at the same time had a really big impact.
So do you think there are any instances where the use of visual comms can negatively impact PR, and are there any examples that have stuck with you?
Of course, I think that everything can have a different outcome that sometimes we think of. I believe in any campaign, before telling a story, we need to think about the audience. And something that happens quite often is seeing brands not adapting to different cultures. An example that I can think of right now is Coca-Cola, who at some point had like their name translated to Chinese, and it meant something completely different than what is meant to be. This is a good example of how not paying attention to cultural elements can impact your brand in a negative way.
Okay, so moving on from visual comms, talking about emotions. Emotions are often used in PR to help organisations connect with audiences on a deeper level and to help people relate to them. So is there a brand that you found yourself relating to because of the emotions used in their campaigns?
Yes, I think one that I can think of is P&G. Obviously, they have so many brands, but I remember one campaign they had for the Olympics in Rio in 2016, and it was called Thank You Mom campaign. They showed a bunch of Olympics and how they were thinking about moments spent with their mom as children and the way they gave them motivation to compete and be strong, and the message was like it takes someone strong to make someone strong. At the same time, I feel like P&G with brands like Always, for example, with the Like a Girl campaign, they always use emotions and a certain type of stories to connect with the public, which is really nice. And I think somehow subconsciously I do consider a brand like this when I shop or when I relate to their brands.
Okay, so would it be correct for me to assume that you are impacted more by PR and comms campaigns when they contain emotions, storytelling and visual comms?
Yes, it's true. I mean, I think that everyone somehow it is. Even on YouTube now, when we go in between, we see like maybe an ad and we tend to skip it. But I think because sometimes it's a good story and we get engaged, and admire in a different way that brand. And again, I think it's more subconsciously because we see images, we see characters involved in the story and in the end attached to the brand.
Our final guest today is Rachel Hatfield, co-founder and COO of Shoe Social Media in Ilkley. Hi Rachel, so my first question for you is, when coming up with campaign ideas, how do you consider the use of emotions, storytelling and visual communications?
Well, it depends on the buyer of each client's audience. Once we know who we're talking to, then we can create visuals, copy, etc., that talks to the consumer and end user.
Okay, so my next question is, do you find that sometimes the visual aspect of an idea will lead or steer the rest of the campaign?
Well, not really for us, as most of our campaigns are data-driven. Once we've analysed the data, we can then make things like visuals fit with the target audience. However, the majority of our clients do get fixated with content marketing.
So how important are visual communications to the audiences of the clients that you work with?
Well, very important, really, because our brains react in a certain way to content. So visuals act as a pattern disruptor to allow the audience to take in the information.
Okay, that's quite interesting actually, because I've never even thought about when I'm consuming content myself, when the visuals can be used to break up blocks of copy and stuff like that. So being in the digital industry as you are, do you find it harder to convey emotions through your comms? And how, if at all, do you convey the emotions online?
No, not really, as we should always be thinking about writing for our target audience and the clients. So using storytelling can help us relate to that person's pain point. You can utilise words and creatives like visuals to help support the story, even when the content is online.
So in your experience, how do people respond to campaigns that involve emotions? Do they respond better or are they more passionate?
Well, you do get more engagement from campaigns if they utilise emotions, if that is your overall objective. However, the majority of audiences are quite private, which is why it's important to analyse the data and track campaign performances. That's why a lot of our campaigns are data-driven.
Okay, so from your data, is there a platform that you find responds best to emotional content?
Oh yeah, Instagram and Facebook come out on top every time when analysing the data for paid social advertising.
Oh, interesting. So to round things off, I just wanted to ask whether there is a specific campaign that you have produced or worked on that involves one of the techniques we've mentioned today, so emotions, storytelling or visual comms, that you are most proud of and why?
I'd probably say the work we did for the car finance company, who are based up in the northeast. We created some really fun visuals using their cars and used this as a talking point with their customers. It hit the spot with revenue and so created a great return on investment for them. And so it was an overall success for all of us.
Okay, so thanks, Rachel, for talking to us today. And it's been great to get your insight as an industry expert.
Well, thank you for that, Katherine. It's been nice to talk to you again. Bye.
That's it for this week's episode, but be sure to tune in next time when we'll be hearing from a new group of guests about their opinions on the future of influencers. See you next time.